Trevor Noah is a little suspicious of those pesky Russians. He said, I'm not going to lie, guys. Wouldn't be surprised if Russia was being sneaky. I mean, this is the same country that hides dolls inside bigger dolls. Do you know how sick you have to be to do that? Trevor also commented on news that South Africa wants to turn Nelson Mandela's home in Johannesburg into a luxury hotel. Does that make sense? Trevor said it actually does. If you remember, one of Mandela's most famous quotes was, "Do not judge me by the color of my skin, but rather judge me by the thread count of these Egyptian cotton sheets." Trevor is nominated for Best Comedy Podcast. Johnny Mac, didn't we just do podcast awards? We did, but these are totally different podcast awards. These are the Ambies put on by the Podcast Academy. This caught my attention because people on the interwebs are not too happy with the nominees for Best Comedy Podcast. They are The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, Ears Edition. I'll start there. I really like Trevor Noah. I really like Comedy Central. I founded Comedy Central Radio on Sirius XM. I like the Comedy Central people. I do think The Daily Show, Ears Edition, does some original content, but at its core, isn't it really just the audio from a TV show? The description of that podcast is listen to highlights and extended interviews in the Ears Edition of The Daily Show. You know, so to me, it's kind of like when you rip the audio from your Netflix special and submit it for Best Comedy Grammy Album. Is it a podcast? It's not really a podcast. I mean, it is a podcast, but then anything is a podcast. I don't know. I love Trevor. I just don't feel like that should be nominated. The other nominees, Best Friends from Earwolf, How Did This Get Made from Earwolf, Spotify's Nosy Neighbors, the Sarah Silverman podcast. Is there any buzz whatsoever on that? I just went on a website called Chartable where you can look up the rankings for various podcasts. I'll take a second here and walk you through this. Right now, the Sarah Silverman podcast is not showing up in the comedy category at all. It is 102nd on Apple Podcasts USA charts for society and culture. This is at about noon on Friday. In that same category, the top three are The Trojan Horse Affair, It's Me Tinks, and We Can Do Hard Things with Glennon Doyle. Now, to be fair to Sarah, when you set up your podcast, you declare a primary category, secondary category, and a tertiary category. So it looks to me, and I don't have access to their dashboard, that they didn't pick comedy as their number one category. I haven't either. I'll explain that in a sec. But you're up for Best Comedy Podcast. You should probably be in the comedy category. Now, right now, around noon on Friday, as I look at the charts, the number one comedy podcast is Morbid, a true crime podcast. Number two, Smartless with Bateman, Hayes, and Arnett. 3, Dana Carvey and David Spade's podcast. 4 is Office Ladies. 5 is Conan. 6, Always Sunny. 7, Adam Carolla. 8, Two Bears, One Cave with Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer. 9, Your Mom's House with Christina P. and Tom Segura. 10, Juicy Scoop with Heather McDonald. Shouldn't we nominate one of those? No? All right, the nominees. Best Friends, How Did This Get Made, Nosy Neighbors, Daily Show, Sarah Silverman, Wait, Don't Tell Me from NPR, and Why Won't You Date Me with Nicole Byer. Now, I mentioned the subcategories and why Sarah Silverman may have chosen differently. I have my primary category as stand-up. I'm not a stand-up comedian, but the choices really are the comedy catch-all, and frankly, I don't have a big enough podcast to even come close to charting on that one. So the game is you go for the subcategories, and the subcategories are like improv, stand-up, and something else. So the closest to what I do, it's not like there's a comedy news category, is stand-up. And right now in the United States, this podcast is a number 31 in the category of stand-up. And my podcast does tend to bounce around number 30 in that category, give or take. Also, it's really fun to look at the international charts. Did you know that in the all comedy category, this is the number 46 podcast in Saudi Arabia, number 4 in stand-up? That's right. In Slovenia, this is the number 4 stand-up podcast. And guess who's got the number 1 stand-up podcast in Ghana? That's right, the king of comedy, Johnny Mac, Daily Comedy News, right now, number 1 stand-up comedy podcast on Apple Podcasts in Ghana. Congratulations to me. Hey, Zimbabwe at number 2. Step it up, guys. So are you the one person listening in Zimbabwe? Hi, thank you, appreciate it. Conan O'Brien talked about when his show on HBO Max might show up. He said, it's the same question that HBO Max is asking me all the time. We're working on something. I can't tell you exactly when it's going to come out. It will not be a night-to-night show. What I'd like to focus on is the stuff that I do that I'm particularly useful at or adept at, and I want to double down on all that. So when you talk about remotes and things where I'm with real people in real situations, that's exactly the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about and what I want to do. I'm quite optimistic that things are going to get better and we're turning a corner, and I can't wait to get back out there. HBO had initially described the show as a weekly variety show, and I heard Conan talk about that, and he said he read the press release, and he was like, what are you talking about? Variety caught up with John Oliver. He's looking forward to making fun of his new bosses at Discovery. He told Variety, we had absolutely no contact with previous owner AT&T, and I could not encourage Discovery more to continue that. Leave us the F alone. Of Discovery CEO, Oliver says, we do not need to meet each other. We do not need to speak. Will he poke fun at his new corporate masters? He said, I mean, yes, there's nothing more satisfying to chomp down on. The beauty with AT&T is it's a hand that has done many terrible things. It deserves to be bitten. His hope is Discovery won't take his bait. I presume they're not fans, but I also do not care. They've at least been smart enough to keep that one to themselves. His current contract goes through the end of 2023. No plans to end it. He says it's still going. It'll still go till it won't anymore. The most joyous reason to even be able to do a show like this is to properly misuse HBO's resources. If this show exists for anything, it's for that. The New York Times reported on Joe Rogan's contract. You know how Joe Rogan got $100 million from Spotify? Oh, no. Apparently he got at least $200 million. Now, when we're talking about like $1 and $2, it's kind of the same thing. Let's not gloss over here. $100 million is a lot of money. $200 million is $100 million more than $100 million. Let's not gloss over that those are two similar numbers. They're not at all. I'll give an example, and I used to talk about this at Sirius when we would negotiate with agents. Sometimes there's no middle. For example, if I wanted you to mow my lawn, and I said, can you do it for free? And you said, I'll do it for $200 million. I can't meet you halfway at $100 million. That's a lot of money. So $200 million. Wow. The Boston Globe has a shiny headline. It is, where does Joe Rogan draw the line? Oh my, Boston comedian Mike McDonald worked with Rogan back in the day. Mike McDonald said, somewhere somebody's got to say, no, Joe, that guy doesn't get to be on your show. Someone has to tell Joe, look, we don't need Pol Pot's opinion. I enjoyed last week. Joe had back-to-back guests about the climate emergency. I'm a big climate guy. And it just seemed like he was going way out of his way to balance the subject. And I'm like, Joe, you don't need to do 7 hours on this with two guests or do this 2 guests in the one show. This is too much, man. So now he's like oversteering and being like, no, I'm fair. Like, just Joe, just do your thing, man. Veteran comedy promoter Bill Blumenreich, who opened the Comedy Connection in Faneuil Hall back in the 80s, says Joe Rogan was ambitious from the outset. In 1990, Joe was the first comic in the whole Boston area to have a cell phone. It made him a lot of money. Every time a comic didn't show up or couldn't make it, you'd have to call someone. You'd be lucky if they called you back 10 hours later, but Joe had a cell phone, so he got a lot of work. 12 years ago, when comedian Mehran Kajani was starting out in Boston, he went to see Rogan at the Comedy Studio. He said Rogan was funny, but used a gay slur repeatedly, which Kajani, who's gay, found odd and unnecessary. He said it wasn't some magical punchline. It was low-key signaling to people that you're the kind of guy who says that word. He said afterwards, smoking a cigarette, he complimented Rogan on his set, but told him, you don't need to use gay slurs gratuitously. He immediately got defensive and was like, oh, come on. Joe feels easy saying certain things because he doesn't have people who stop him. Like if you talk a big anti-feminist game with real-ass women in the room, you're going to get clamped back at. That tells me you don't kick it with a lot of strong women. Wow. Sue Costello. I know Sue. She used to be a guest on Brewer Show all the time. Sue is fun. Sounds like she's not a fan either. She said, Joe came on after me and was so viciously disgusting to me. He said, who would ever bang her with that accent? Sue has a thick Boston accent. It just ripped through my chest, says Sue. She's called Joe Rogan out for it on social media. All his bros attack me, saying I'm a bleeping old lady, and who do I think I am? Now, Joe's the one taking some hits, and he's being a big wimp. Boston comic Don Zolo, regular listener and Rogan fan. Hey, Globe, you kind of deep dove here. Like, we're not talking to, like, Bill Burr and Conan O'Brien and the Boston elite here. Don Zolo says Joe Rogan's podcast is an antidote to cancel culture, which he believes has infected everyone from sports to media to college to Hollywood. The two things Joe is selling that tick a lot of people off are truth and masculinity. Joe's willing to talk with people instead of just blindly believing what he's told. The mainstream media doesn't like that. Here's my advice, and this is what I do. I open up the app, and I see who Joe Rogan has on, and I cherry pick the episodes. He had Jim Gaffigan on. I'm like, all right, I'll listen to this. He had climate change guys on. I'm like, I'm interested in that subject. I listened to a little. He had Joey Diaz on, who, in my experience, the one time I met Joey Diaz, was the most horrible person in the history of the world that I ever met. That is my opinion of Joey Diaz, so I didn't listen to the episode. Today's Daily Comedy News is brought to you by the podcast The Best Song Ever This Week. This week, the best song ever this week is Betty Davis's They Say I'm Different. Host Scott Frampton deep dives on a song every week. He wrote, Betty Davis blazed a sexually explicit funk rock trail. As her ex-husband Miles Davis put it, she was Madonna before Madonna, Prince before Prince. Download the best song ever this week wherever you get your shows. All right, so those Donuts Chain t-shirts, here's the deal. So I use a company, I'm not a t-shirt entrepreneur. I don't print t-shirts here in the basement. But they won't print them unless you hit a certain amount. We got to get to 30. We're well shy of 30. This is the last week. So if we're going to get National Donuts Chain t-shirts to support the show, you got to go to tinyurl.com/donuts-chain, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews and you'll see a link to the t-shirt on there. T-shirts are $20 plus shipping. I'll get $5 of that. I'm not going to make it. Thank you. I hope we make it. But I don't think we're going to make it. Thanks for those of you who tried to support this little effort here, but we may have to just move on. If you'd like to support the show regardless, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews. One of the many things I do in my life is I host the weekly comedy thing for the app that is now known as Live One. Yes, it's been renamed the Live One app. The app is free. My show is free. And on that show called the Weekly Comedy Thing, I talk some comedy news, kind of like this, but I also get to play bits this week on the show. Mark Maron, he made the Podcast Hall of Fame. Amy Schumer and Wanda Sykes are hosting the Oscars for some reason. Tig Notaro was on that horrible Star Trek series. Andy Kindler got into a fight with somebody on Cameo. Lewis Black talks masks. Jess Salomon and Morgan Murphy are some comedians that you may not know. They are very funny. Kevin Hart's on a national tour. Donald Glover's ending Atlanta. Spoilers. You'll hear about that in a second. More news about the Bob Saget autopsy, the George Carlin documentary, and Kathy Griffin went skinny dipping. So if you want to check out the Weekly Comedy Thing and hear those comedians, it's on the Live One app. It is free. The show's called the Weekly Comedy Thing. All right, you guys went on social media. My question was, should I add Henry Winkler to the Mac Pack? If you were a new listener, the Mac Pack is my fantasy group of celebrities I would hang out with. Like Frank Sinatra hung out with Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr., I would hang out with Michael Chiklis, Keegan-Michael Key, Andy Samberg, and now officially we're inducting Henry Winkler is now a member of the Mac Pack. So someday you're going to see some lame version of Entourage with me driving around in a 2006 Hyundai Tucson with Henry Winkler riding shotgun, and in the backseat, Chiklis, Samberg, Keegan-Michael Key, all cramped up. Moonroof will be open, and we'll be playing Van Halen. It's like really lame Entourage. That's the Mac Pack. Congratulations, Henry Winkler. And I'm trying to back down on this Pete Davidson stuff, but even seriously, this morning at breakfast, my wife was like, did you see Kanye West? I'm like, yes, I talk about it every day, and the audience is telling me they're sick of it. I can't ignore it. He dragged Lorne Michaels into this now. Remember a few years back, Pete Davidson did a segment on Weekend Update where he told Kanye West he should take medication for bipolar disorder, and Pete was actually being serious there? Well, that started making the rounds again last week. Kanye commented on the clip on Instagram saying, "Hi, Skeet. You got any more mental health jokes for me?" This boy thought he could get away with performing the sketch for the team that wrote it for him. This is not harassment. This is payback. In a follow-up post, he targeted Lorne Michaels. He shared Lorne Michaels' Wikipedia bio and wrote, "Next up." It's getting a little scary. Donald Glover has announced that Atlanta will end after season 4. Season 3 is about to come out, but Glover says, to be honest, I kind of wanted to end it after season 2. When the conditions are right for something to happen, it happens. When they're not, it doesn't. The story was always supposed to be what it was. From The Independent, footage has emerged showing a clash between a ticket holder and protesters at the Corn Exchange in Cambridge. This was a Jimmy Carr show. The protesters could be heard calling the gig goer a disgrace after the patron allegedly said Jimmy Carr's joke was funny. A protester claimed, "You just walked up to my family and my community and said it's a joke. How's it a joke? Are you joking me? I'm an Irish gay traveler. He's offended me. You're not from that background, so to somebody like you, it might be a joke, but we don't talk about disabled people. We don't talk about Jews that were murdered, travelers were murdered, gypsies were murdered, gay people were murdered, all right?" Signs outside the gig read, "Genocide is not a subject for mockery. The only death I'm laughing at is Jimmy Carr's career." Which is, I don't know, that's a bit of a weird move to me. Like, everything I read there, you heard me change my tone, was like dead serious. And then somebody's got the only death I'm laughing at is Jimmy Carr's career. Like, now we're back in a crack at jokes. I don't know. And here's a shocker for you. I'm being dead serious here. Adam Sandler. And you know I'm a big fan of Adam Sandler movies. Adam Sandler released a trailer for Hustle. In Hustle, Adam Sandler plays a scout trying to get back into the game. Basketball scout played by Adam Sandler, who discovers a once-in-a-lifetime player with a rocky past abroad, only to bring him to the States without his team's approval, and together they take one final shot to prove they have what it takes to make it to the NBA. So I watched the trailer for Hustle. Looks pretty good. Longtime listeners know, I think almost every Adam Sandler film is complete garbage. The best Adam Sandler film by a mile is Uncut Gems, and the ones with Drew Barrymore are watchable. Everything else, complete, utter garbage. Jack and Jill? Are you kidding me? But hey, people like them, but I'm being serious here. I watched the trailer for this one, and it's Adam Sandler showing his acting chops. Adam, you've got them. I've seen them. I saw Uncut Gems. I know what you can do. I'm rooting for you, bro. Stop doing Jack and Jill. More of this. So I hope Hustle is as good as the trailer looks. And that's your comedy news for today. BuyMeACoffee.com/dailycomedynews. Follow the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your shows. Back tomorrow.